G'day Grant,
G'day.
it's been so good meeting you today. My name's Joseph from Encore Music, and we were so blown away that we decided to have a chat and find out a little bit about your life story.
Thank you.
How old were you when you first heard electric guitar?
Very early. My first memory is AC/DC.
Sure. Yeah.
And very shortly after, I wanted to play guitar.
Yes.
And just bugged
That was
my
it?
parents to get.
And was it like that? Was it that sort of coming to Jesus moment where you're like, there was before hearing guitar and after?
Yeah, I think I loved, guitar playing and whatnot. But the day that actually got me right into to music was my first day of high school.
Okay.
Caught up with a buddy.
Yeah.
That I hadn't seen in a while, and he said, "Let's go to the music room."
Okay.
And the guys.
Where's this story going, Grant?
The guys got together and they played. They would have played like an AC/DC song.
Oh,
or
like a
blues.
band.
Yeah.
Right.
And they got together and actually jammed a song, and it was the most killer thing I'd ever seen in my life. I said, "That's it. I actually need to learn to play."
You weren't a guitar player.
No, I could kind of like
got it.
little bit, but.
So this is high school?
Yeah, high school. Like
you're like 13 or 14?
Yeah, 13. Day one of high school, the guys just get together and play a wild thing, and
So
I'm just blown
what
away.
were you into before you were into guitar? What was your thing?
I think I was a little lost. I didn't really have a thing. I think
Okay,
that
so you weren't like a footy guy or a soccer guy or basketball.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're hearing AC/DC, which, let's be honest, there's a lot to love about it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm listening to your playing now, and obviously from a technique point of view, it's progressed. And that doesn't mean no shade on AC/DC. It's actually very difficult to play that stuff correctly. But who was the first guitar player after Angus that you really jived with?
Yeah, that would probably be Kurt Hammett from
Sure.
Metallica. So once I got into that Metallica
Okay.
thing and everything started to be a little bit.
How soon after this did you come out to yourself and realise that you were functionally gay?
Always knew that.
Come on. It was Dave Mustaine or Kirk, and I liked Kirk. I wanted to be friends with Kirk, but I could safely leave Kirk with my mum or my girlfriend. I couldn't do that with Dave Mustaine. He had "I'm going to sleep with your wife" written all over it.
But no, Dave is probably one of my favourite musicians.
What a riff
to
writer.
this day, he's probably my top.
And he's
top
also
muso.
he's for a guy that had such a long-term heroin addiction. He's so sharp.
Yeah.
You read the words on Holy Wars or Hangar 18. You're like, this is a guy that is reading political science material. He's not just reading the front of the Washington Post or whatever. And I thought to myself, how did he maintain that? Plus, the normal exploits of being a rock star. I don't know, but I'm hoping to meet him when they come through because I'm just such a fan. But it's like when you're a professional, you can't fanboy on them because it makes them awkward.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to get my shit together.
That's
and
it.
not do that.
Yeah.
Either that or just hit on his wife and see what happens. So you're 13 or 14. Tell me about the first electric guitar that you got.
I had a Strat copy. It was called a Rock.
Okay.
And that was the brand, Rock. And I just played constantly on
Did
that
you shred
thing.
your fingers on the edges like cheese?
Oh yeah, it was a disastrous guitar. But you know what? It's what I had.
It's
so
what you had.
I just went for it.
And was this? Did you grow up here or in WA?
I actually grew up in Tasmania, so
Right.
I'm like rural Tasmania.
So you were hip and postmodern woke before everyone else then?
Pretty much, and I was in an environment where this sort of stuff was not at all cool, or anybody even knew about it. So,
But you could have gone to the farmer's market and bought yourself some ash smoked double brie.
but
So, let me extrapolate. I'm guessing that you grew up in rural Tasmania somewhat, and maybe you could make a lot of noise, and your parents were like, "See you at 6 o'clock for dinner."
Yeah, it was pretty much like that.
So, how many hours a day were you putting in once you were serious about guitar?
Once I hit that, just rock and roll, I want to just play.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of hours.
Yeah.
I remember even once playing, and then looking up and realised I've missed the bus for school, and just just keep going, all day.
When you got home from school and it's like 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you had a quick snack and did your things you need to do, and then you sat down and you blinked and went, shit, it's 9 o'clock. This is all the time. Like the time would go. I'd have these kind of like phase shifts, But it was great. I think it's so good for a kid to have. It doesn't have to be guitar playing or music, but just one thing that isn't a screen that they're nuts about.
was good.
So, tell me about the first good guitar you ever purchased.
Okay, my first good guitar.
Yeah, something that was
Okay.
actually tonally and its playability-wise really great. Or are you yet to purchase that?
No, I think I've got lots of nice guitars. So my main guitar that is a PRS guitar,
Okay.
which I just really just thought, you know what, I'm going to take music serious. I'm going to buy the serious
What
guitar.
age were you when you bought this?
I would have been like, this was way after, you know,
Yeah.
years after. I've played lots of I don't know, maybe late 20s,
Yep.
maybe even.
But
maybe even
had
after
you
that.
earned some money from gigs and stuff before this? Or-
Yeah.
So just help me paint the picture for myself, because this is, you know, we haven't had this conversation. We've effectively just met. It's a blooming bromance. But you know, I was saying to the owner of Ankle Music, who's a violin maker and repairer, I said, I have not been blown away by a guitar player since Eric Johnson in 1990. You reach a certain stage when you work in the industry where you've kind of heard it all, but it's not that you've heard it all, but you're saturated by a bad Tube Screamer pedal, a bad copy of a JCM 800. You know, like your brain starts being unable to distinguish. And have you always had super accurate double picking technique?
Those years of sitting down with that Strat,
Yeah.
where the formation of
Yes.
that, I copied James Hetfield's
Okay, his
right
down
hand.
picking,
Yeah,
yeah.
so you know, I spent all of those. You know, would have talking like must have been at least 3 years of just playing all those riffs and copying and getting just sitting me and an amp, hardly any gain. I finally bought a Tube Screamer and started pushing it a little bit, and back then I didn't really even have anything else to copy because Metallica being the biggest.
They
band,
were so dominant.
I could actually get a video of him.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Back
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
So
yeah.
somebody.
And the double wide Mesa Boogie advert pretty much every month for like, what was it? I think from when Master of Puppets came out all the way through to the second Black tour album, I think it was every month. There's Kurt and James with, whichever model, Mark III they were playing. But I think for me what was so revolutionary about it was, I'd started playing at 13, but I'd been repairing violins and making longbows since I was a kid. My grandfather had been a very successful timber dealer after the Second World War, importing spruce via Canada. And my dad was a television presenter, but he liked to do this crazy hobby, which was to build ships in bottles, they put it up. If my father had been bigger, I think he would have been a very successful sociopath, because there's just no reasonable explanation for it. And if you're that patient and fiddly, you're kind of close to being Dexter, really. But it meant that I started my playing life with a full collection of planes, gouges, wood. I knew what that stuff was. I knew how to shape a neck functionally. But by 15, I'm just working on super strats. Literally half of my client base is warm-off builds, warm-off the parts manufacturer. Because back then, you had to have an account with them. It was quite easy to get. You needed the British equivalent of an ABN, right? And you needed to order 5 bodies and 5 necks was the minimum order. So guys would come to me and they'd be like, I want like a Charvel type body with EMGs. It was always with EMGs. And I want locking machine heads on a Graphtec nut, and it has to have the Dunlop 6100 wire, which is the same as what's standard on all of Zach's wild guitars. It's tall and it's wide. Jackson wire, And what was good about that for me was I learned without having to learn too much the hard way. I learned what Alder actually sounds like, and I learned what Swan Pash sounds like, and I learned that EMGs do make every guitar sound the same, but passive pickups don't. But what was great about it was, because I couldn't play those styles that you played, it meant there was no ego barrier. I just asked people a lot of questions. How do you like it? And then I try my best to supply it. And I found with progressive and heavy musicians that they tend to be a type which is quite shy and quite analytical and introverted, but they're very good at articulating how they want their guitar to play. And I mean, obviously you have severe technique, but how critical to you in terms of executing all of your ideas is a fantastic setup?
A lot these days. Mind you, I started guitar completely opposite as you.
Yeah.
So I had no idea about anything.
Okay.
And living in rural Tasmania, you don't get access, particularly in those days, you didn't get access to information.
Just pre-internet?
Yes, yeah.
So we're talking like early 90s?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was, for me to find out that there was even difference in frets, different scale lengths. I actually didn't even really learn that stuff until way after.
Right.
So,
but that's true of a lot of pro players. I notice sometimes the better the player, the less, not knowledge they have, but they're not interested in the specification of gear. You find most guys that really care about that tube type or that pickup type, they tend to be semi-professional players. Now, I'm putting no shade on that. I personally don't care if the client can play or not. I care that they enjoy it. But some of the most schooled up musicians I've known have been lawyers, doctors and dentists, those three, or accountants with very high-end function bands. And they tend to play all of the conferences and stuff because they can afford to buy a $100,000 PA and lighting rig and run it, But we're in a post-COVID world. You and I were talking earlier about COVID. What did COVID do to your gigging life? And I'm going to ask you to be really honest because I think it's important that people get a snapshot of what's it like to have a career as a professional musician.
So gigging a lot and teaching was where I was at, and I was fortunate enough to have that, to be able to do it.
Okay, and that was the bulk of your living?
It was the bulk of my living, and I think your living situation has to be in a situation where you can do it as well. So I think you have to be able to have a living situation where you don't have to, you can live on nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
You've got your
like
guitars,
keeping your expenses down?
Keeping expenses low because I was playing. I was touring with a band called Mason. It was thrash. It was, what I mean. This isn't the band was doing really, really well, but the better the band does, then you just do the next thing above. You know what I mean? Because that's what you're doing.
It's almost impossible, Australia, even with home basing. It's impossible to tour cheaply. You can fix base your costs, but a flight to Perth or a flight to Gold Coast is what it is. I've noticed that many professional drummers and guitar players here are much more aware of how long and the best way of setting up their kits. You find with Europe and American-based players, they reach a certain level which is lower than perhaps the level here financially, but they're on a bus or they've got a U-Haul, and they're driving as little as 35 kilometres to the next show, and they almost know that one of the fans or fan club members is going to go, would you guys like to sleep on my floor tonight? Here's a couch. I'll shout you breakfast in the morning. And so their touring budget is almost set up for that. But you can't do that when you're flying in and flying out. So in terms of, let's say, stability of the neck and reliability of the overall functioning of the guitar, just how important is that to you, Grant?
Really, these days I'm a little more attuned as
like Powderfinger these days, or like these days, nothing.
I love Powderfinger.
Yeah, my son when he was a kid, he couldn't say their name, and he used to bounce up and down to the bed. And he'd go, "It's Powderginger." So I grew up thinking of them as Powder Ginger. I just thought that was such a better name, Powderginger, because everyone loves a ginger, don't they? You guys don't abuse your gingers like we do back home, but.
Killer band.
Fantastic band. What great songs.
But yeah, the neck, I need it to be pretty perfect these days. I think, I suppose now that I know a lot more about necks and those sorts of things, where before, when I didn't know anything about necks, I just pick guitars up and play them, not knowing, like, this is a good guitar. I have no idea why.
Yeah, and it's that unconscious awareness that it can actually do guitar players a lot of harm, and let me explain why. Guitar players often unwittingly buy a setup. It was the formula for PRS's early successes. Killer maple top, pickups that aren't DiMarzio's, actually sound great with the coil split that was revolutionary. A tremolo that original man-made tremolo is machine done on a block of steel. It's not cast steel. It's one piece. It sounds incredible. But the setup was dialed in. You pick it up off, it was just dialed in. So in terms of your preferred setup, are you going for quite a straight neck nowadays?
Straighter neck.
Lower nut.
Yep. You know, I'm really into the stainless steel frets these days.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
Because they stay smooth.
yeah, stay smooth. And I like frets that you can. It's hard to explain that you can end a note nicely.
So
That's-
I think where you're getting at is the fret is so hard and so smooth, and there's almost like a glass-like lack of friction in there. It's a bit like when you get in your shower and you've got long hair, which you don't anymore, and I
Yeah, I
don't,
used to
but
have it,
when
yeah.
we had it, and you sort of muzz your hair with water, but then you put conditioner in, your hand moves through your hair so much more freely. And I realise what I just said there, but Jennifer Aniston is awesome, and it's because I'm worth it, okay? Point being, every aspect of your vibrato or the way you exit and enter that note is represented through the amp, isn't it? Yeah. It's why I love stainless steel frets. I hate doing the work on them because it's so much harder. But
it would be,
but they last. And for me, when I polish out a Jezcar nickel steel fret, as little as 3 days later, it's not as smooth and shiny as it was. And that's even if the client isn't playing the guitar that much. So you sort of feel like you're chasing your tail a bit.
Okay. Plenty of necks.
Well, look, we had a fantastic time with you in the store. We really
It's been great.
Enjoyed it. We hope you come and see us again soon. Please tell everyone that's watching where they can find you online.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Just Grant Burns Guitar, and you'll see me shredding.
So is that GrantBurns Guitar?
Correct.
Okay, Grant Burns Guitar. Well, Grant, we said we were going to hook you up with some manufacturers and see if we can get you doing some clinics. I sincerely hope you come and do a clinic for us at Encore Music real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.